Welcome to HOA Boardroom Battles. Keep your boots on for this one. I am standing in my driveway at 6:45 in the morning, and Angela Walker is screaming at me about a sled. Not blocking the sidewalk, not in the street, just leaning against my garage door where I left it last night after my nephew went home. She is waving a certified letter with snow-wet corners and telling me I have 72 hours to remove the unauthorized outdoor storage, or the association will impose a $500 fine and pursue immediate compliance action. I am an auto body estimator. I document damage and write quotes for a living, and I can see from 10 feet away that the envelope she is holding has no postmark because she hand-delivered it this morning while I was scraping ice off my windshield. Angela is the finance committee lead for the Brookhaven Snow Patrol District Association, and she has made it her personal mission to enforce every snow rule, shoveling requirement, and made-up ordinance like she is running a private police force. I moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho 2 years ago because the cost of living was manageable, and I wanted to save up for a down payment on a bigger place, maybe something with a little land outside the HOA sprawl. The neighborhood is one of those developments where the committee micromanages shoveling like it is architecture, and every storm brings a new round of violation notices for ice dams, uneven sidewalks, or snow piles too close to the curb. Angela showed up the first winter I was here with a tape measure and a clipboard, checking the height of my snowbank against some guideline nobody else had ever heard of. This morning she is angrier than usual, and I am already 10 minutes behind schedule because the plows came through late and buried the end of my driveway in a frozen ridge I had to chop through with a shovel. Angela is saying, "You can be mad or you can be compliant. Choose one." I look at the sled, then back at her. It is a plastic toboggan, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $30. It is not blocking anything, not visible from the street, and definitely not a code violation. I ask her what rule I am breaking, and she taps her smartwatch like it is some kind of authority badge and tells me outdoor storage is clearly prohibited under the Community Standards Addendum, Section 12. I have read the Community Standards Addendum twice because Angela has cited it before, and Section 12 is about sheds and permanent structures, not a sled that will be gone the next time my nephew visits. I tell her that, and she cuts me off and says, "Keep arguing, you are making my case for me." She says the board has already documented this violation and the clock is running. I glance at my phone because I need to be at the shop by 7:30, and this conversation is eating my buffer. Angela sees me check the time and smiles, the kind of smile that says she knows exactly what she is doing. She scheduled this confrontation when I am leaving for work, and the snow makes me slower. I take a breath and tell her I will move the sled tonight when I get home, but she shakes her head and says the compliance window starts now, and if I am not in adherence by end of business today, the fee schedule activates. I ask what fee schedule, and she taps the envelope and says it is all outlined in the letter. She turns and walks back toward the sidewalk, boots crunching in the snow, and I stand there holding my scraper and watching her go. I get in my car, blast the heat, and open the envelope while the defroster runs. Inside is a printed notice on Brookhaven Snow Patrol District Association letterhead, listing my address, the violation description, outdoor storage of recreational equipment, and a penalty matrix that starts at $500 and doubles every 7 days. There is no signature, no board vote record, no reference to any actual meeting where this was discussed. At the bottom in small print it says failure to remit payment or remove violation may result in further action, including lien filing and vehicle impoundment. I read that line 3 times. Vehicle impoundment. For a sled. I fold the letter, shove it in my coat pocket, and back out of my driveway 15 minutes later than I wanted. All the way to work I am thinking about the phrase further action and wondering how far Angela is willing to push this. The shop is busy because winter means fender benders and undercarriage damage from ice and salt, and I spend the morning writing estimates for cracked bumpers and bent suspension components while my phone buzzes in my pocket. I ignore it until lunch, Then check and see 2 missed calls from an unknown local number and a voicemail from someone who identifies himself as a representative of the Brookhaven Snow Patrol District Association Enforcement Committee. The message says I have been unresponsive to compliance outreach and I need to contact the association office immediately to schedule a hearing. I save the voicemail, screenshot the call log, and text my coworker Mike, who lives 3 streets over in the same neighborhood. He texts back, "Angela is on a tear this year. Half the block has gotten letters." I ask if anyone has actually paid the fines, and he says, "Nobody I know, but she threatened to boot someone's car last month and they caved." I eat a sandwich at my desk and search the county ordinance database for outdoor storage rules. The only relevant code is about commercial equipment and junk vehicles, nothing about sleds or recreational gear on private property. I pull up the HOA covenants and read Section 12 again. It says, "No permanent outbuildings, sheds, or storage structures shall be erected without prior architectural approval." A sled is not a structure. I screenshot the text and email it to myself, then pull up the Enforcement Committee contact page on the association website. There is no phone number, just a web form that asks for your address, violation reference number, and a statement of your concern. I fill it out, attach a photo of the sled from this morning, and submit it with a note saying the item in question is temporary recreational equipment and does not meet the definition of outdoor storage under Section 12. I hit send and go back to work. By 3 o'clock, I have written 6 estimates and taken 2 calls from insurance adjusters, and when I check my email, I have a reply from the Enforcement Committee. It is 2 sentences. Your appeal has been reviewed and denied. The violation stands as issued, and the compliance deadline remains in effect. No explanation, no reference to any rule, just denied. I close the email and stare at the screen for a minute, then forward the whole chain to my personal account and start a new folder labeled HOA Evidence. I get home a little after 6. The sled is exactly where I left it. I move it into the garage, close the door, and take a picture of the empty space where it was. Then I walk around the side of the house and check the mailbox. Inside is another envelope, same association letterhead, same snow damp corners. This one is dated today and titled Final Notice of Compliance Violation. It says the outdoor storage has been observed as of 4 p.m. today, which means Angela or someone from the board drove by and documented it before I got home. And the penalty has escalated to $750 due within 10 business days. At the bottom it says, continued non-compliance may result in legal action and recovery of association costs, including attorney fees. I take the letter inside, scan it with my phone, and add it to the folder. Then I sit down at the kitchen table and do the math. $750 is half of what I have saved this month toward my down payment fund. If this keeps escalating, I am looking at losing thousands of dollars over a sled I already moved. I text Mike and ask if he knows anyone who has fought the HOA and won. He replies, not personally, but I heard someone got a lawyer and the board backed off. Lawyers cost money too, and I am trying to save, not spend. I consider ignoring the letter and seeing if they actually follow through, but the line about attorney fees makes me nervous. If they file a lien, it could mess up my credit and kill my mortgage chances. I need a different plan. That night I read through the HOA bylaws cover to cover. Buried in Article 9, I find a section about dispute resolution. It says any member may request mediation before a penalty is enforced, and the board is required to respond within 15 days. I draft an email to the board, cite Article 9, and formally request mediation regarding the outdoor storage citation. I attach the photos, the ordinance search results, and the Section 12 text. I send it at 8 p.m. and copy my personal email so I have proof of delivery. The next morning I get a reply from Angela. It is curt. Your request for mediation has been referred to the Compliance Committee. You will be contacted when a hearing date is available. Processing time is approximately 30 days. Please remit payment of outstanding penalties to avoid additional fees. I read it twice and realize what she is doing. She is stalling the mediation while the penalty clock keeps running, hoping I will either pay to make it stop or miss the window and default into a lien. I forward the email to my evidence folder and reply, I am exercising my right under Article 9, and I expect a response within the 15-day requirement. I do not expect payment to be required during a pending dispute. I hit send and go to work. The morning is quiet until about 10:30 when I get a call from a blocked number. I answer, and a man with a flat, bored voice says he is calling from a records management company contracted by Brookhaven Snow Patrol, and I have submitted a request for documents related to a violation. I tell him I have not submitted any request yet, and he says the enforcement committee logged my email as a records inquiry, and I need to pay a processing fee of $75 plus 10 cents per page to receive copies. I ask how many pages, and he says approximately 200. I do the math in my head. $75 plus $20 is $95 just to see the documents the HOA used to justify the fine. I ask if I can review the records in person, and he says the association office does not allow walk-in access and all requests must go through the vendor portal with payment up front. I thank him, hang up, and immediately call Mike. Mike answers on the second ring and I explain the records shakedown. He laughs, but it is not a happy laugh. He says that is Angela's move. She did the same thing to a guy down the street who asked for meeting minutes. He paid the fee and got a stack of blank agendas and old landscaping invoices. Nothing useful. I ask if he reported it, and Mike says to who? The board is the one doing it. I thank him and hang up, then I Google the vendor name on the letter. The company is a commercial document services firm in Spokane, about 30 miles away, and their website lists HOA Records Management as one of their services. I call the main line and ask to speak to someone about a request. The receptionist transfers me to a supervisor, and I explain that I am being charged $95 for records that should be available to members under the bylaws. The supervisor is polite but firm. She says the fee structure is set by the client, meaning the HOA, and the company is just processing the requests as directed. I ask if there is any oversight or audit process, and she says that is between the member and the association. I hang up and sit there staring at my phone. Angela is layering obstacles on purpose, turning every step into a test to see if I will give up. I am not giving up, but I also cannot afford to burn through hundreds of dollars on fees and lawyer consults while she keeps escalating. I need leverage, something that changes the equation before the penalties spiral out of control. That afternoon, I take an early break and drive to the City Code Enforcement Office. It is a squat brick building near the county courthouse, and the front desk is staffed by a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain. I explain that I have an HOA claiming I violated a storage rule, and I want to confirm whether the city has any ordinance that applies. She listens, asks for my address, and pulls up the parcel record on her computer. She scrolls for a minute, then shakes her head. She says no code violations on file, and nothing in the municipal code about recreational equipment on private property as long as it is not a public nuisance or safety hazard. A sled in your garage area does not qualify. I ask if she can put that in writing, and she prints a one-page summary of the relevant ordinances with a stamp at the bottom that says City of Coeur d'Alene Code Enforcement Office. I thank her, fold the paper carefully, and take it back to my car. For the first time in 2 days, I feel like I have something solid, a third-party confirmation that Angela is making up rules. I scan the page with my phone and add it to my evidence folder, then drive back to the shop. By the time I clock out at 5, I have a plan. I am going to force the HOA to either provide the mediation they are required to offer or admit they are denying it, and I am going to document every refusal so I have a paper trail when this goes to the next level. That night, I send a second email to the board, attaching the code enforcement summary and requesting an immediate mediation date under Article 9. I state clearly that I have met the compliance requirement by moving the sled, and I am formally disputing the penalties as unsupported by any enforceable rule. I close with, I expect a response within the mandated 15-day window as outlined in the bylaws. If the board does not respond, I will consider this a violation of procedure and pursue further action. I send it, copy my evidence folder, and pour a drink. Then I sit down and reread every email, every letter, and every voicemail Angela and the enforcement committee have sent. I am looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that suggests the fines are not legitimate. What I find is worse than I expected. The penalty amounts in the letters do not match the fine schedule posted on the association website. The website says first violations are $250, but Angela is charging $500. The second notice jumped to $750, but the schedule says second offenses are $500. Someone is inflating the numbers, and I have no idea if it is Angela, the enforcement committee, or the management company the HOA contracts with. I screenshot the discrepancies, highlight them in red, and add them to the folder. Then I start searching for the management company name. It is listed at the bottom of every letter in tiny print, Clearwater Property Compliance Services. I Google them and find a generic website with a contact form and a vague mission statement about community standards and covenant enforcement. No phone number, no office address, just a P.O. box in Coeur d'Alene. I fill out the contact form and ask for a copy of my account statement and a breakdown of the fees being charged. I submit it and go to bed, knowing I probably will not get a real answer, but wanting the record to show I tried. The next morning, I wake up to a missed call from the blocked number again and a voicemail that says my request has been escalated to the board and I will not receive a response until the next monthly meeting, which is 3 weeks away. 3 weeks puts me past the 15-day mediation deadline and well into the penalty doubling window. I save the voicemail and forward it to my evidence folder, then get ready for work. The shop is slammed because a storm moved through overnight and half the cars in the lot have fresh dents and scrapes from sliding on ice. I am writing estimates all morning, and I do not check my phone until lunch. When I do, I have 2 new emails. The first is from Clearwater Property Compliance Services. It says my account has been flagged for non-payment and my access to community amenities, including the gate code and guest parking permits, has been suspended pending resolution. The second email is from Angela, sent directly to my personal address instead of through the board portal. It says, I noticed your vehicle was parked in the driveway this morning during restricted hours. Please be advised that overnight driveway parking is prohibited under winter emergency rules, and violations will be towed at owner expense. I read it 3 times, trying to figure out what restricted hours she is talking about. I checked the bylaws again and find a section about snow emergency procedures. It says during active snow removal operations, residents are encouraged to park in garages to allow plow access. Encouraged, not required. There is no mention of restricted hours or towing authority. I screenshot the section and reply to Angela. My vehicle was parked legally on my own property. Please provide the specific rule you are referencing, including the date it was enacted and the board vote approving it. I send it and go back to work, but I cannot focus. Angela is shifting tactics, moving from the Sled fine to a new threat, and I know this is not going to stop until I make it stop. That afternoon, I call Mike again and ask if he knows anyone on the board who is not part of Angela's crew. He thinks for a minute and says, there is a guy named Tom who is on the landscaping committee. He seems normal. I have seen him at a couple meetings, and he usually votes against Angela's crazy stuff, but he is outnumbered. I ask if Mike can get me Tom's number, and he says he will try. An hour later, Mike texts me a contact, Tom Bellamy, and a note that says, he knows about Angela's games, but he is scared of retaliation, so he stays quiet. I save the number and send Tom a text. I introduce myself, explain the Sled situation and the escalating fines, and ask if he has seen any board discussion about towing authority or inflated penalties. He does not reply right away, and I assume he is either ignoring me or checking with someone else. Then, around 7 p.m., my phone buzzes. Tom's message says, I have not seen formal votes on any of that. Angela runs finance and enforcement like her own department, and she does not bring a lot of it to the full board. If you want to challenge her, you need to show up at the next meeting and demand answers in public. She hates being questioned in front of people. I thank him and ask when the next meeting is. He replies 2 weeks, second Tuesday of the month, 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. I mark it on my calendar and start planning what I am going to say. The next few days are tense but quiet. Angela does not send any new letters and I do not get any more block number calls. I move my car into the garage every night just to avoid giving her another excuse. I keep checking my email for a mediation response, but nothing comes. On Friday, I get a text from Mike. He says, "You need to see this." And he sends me a photo of a door hanger that was left on his front door. It is a printed notice on Brookhaven Snow Patrol District Association letterhead, and it says, "Reminder, all residents are required to maintain clear sidewalks within 24 hours of snowfall. Failure to comply will result in association-hired removal and cost recovery." The paper is wet around the edges from sitting in the snow, and the ink is starting to run. Mike's text says, "She is hitting everyone on the block with these now." I look at the photo and recognize the format. It is the same template as the letters I have been getting. Same letterhead, same vague threats. I ask Mike if anyone has actually had the HOA hire a crew to clear their sidewalk, and he says, "Not that I know of, but people are freaking out because nobody wants a surprise bill." I tell him to save the door hanger and take photos, and I send him a link to the evidence folder I have been building. He replies with a thumbs up emoji and says he will start keeping his own records. I feel a little better knowing I am not the only one documenting this, but I also know Angela is spreading her enforcement net wider, which means she is feeling confident. That confidence makes me nervous, because it means she thinks she can get away with it. On Monday, I get home from work and find my gate code does not work. I pull up to the keypad at the neighborhood entrance, enter the 4-digit code I have used for 2 years, and the screen flashes invalid code, access denied. I try again, same result. There is a line of cars behind me, so I pull into the visitor lane and call the association number listed on the gate call box. It rings 6 times and goes to voicemail. I leave a message explaining the problem and asking for my access to be restored. Then I wait. After 10 minutes, a car pulls up behind me and the driver, a guy in his 40s wearing a rideshare company sticker on his windshield, rolls down his window and asks if I need help. I explain that my code is not working and I live here, and he shrugs and says, "Happens all the time, the board shuts people off for random reasons. You can follow me through if you want." I thank him and wait for him to pull forward, then I follow him through the gate when it opens. As we pass the call box, I see him roll his eyes and shake his head, and I realize he has seen this before. Inside the neighborhood, I park in my driveway and immediately send an email to the board, copying Angela and the enforcement committee. I write, "My gate access was disabled without notice or explanation. I am a dues-paying member in good standing, and I have not been informed of any policy that allows access suspension as a penalty. I request immediate restoration and a written explanation of the decision." I send it and wait. An hour later, Angela replies. Her email says, "Access suspension is a standard enforcement measure for members with outstanding compliance issues. Your access will be restored when your account is current." I read it twice, then I reply, "I do not have any outstanding compliance issues. I disputed the Sled citation under Article 9 and I am awaiting mediation. Access suspension during a pending dispute is not supported by the bylaws. Please restore my access immediately." I hit send and pour another drink. Then I sit down and update my evidence folder with screenshots of the gate denial and the email chain. Tuesday morning, I wake up to a new email from Angela. It is short. "Your vehicle was observed parked in the driveway overnight in violation of winter emergency parking rules. A tow has been authorized and will be executed within 24 hours unless you remit payment of all outstanding fines and penalties. Current balance $1,250. I read it 3 times and feel my stomach drop. $1,250. She has added fees, late charges, and who knows what else to the original Sled citation, and now she is threatening to tow my car unless I pay. I check the driveway through the front window. My car is exactly where I left it last night, parked legally on my own property. I grab my phone and call the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher asks what I need, and I explain that my HOA is threatening to tow my car from my own driveway, and I want to know if that is legal. She puts me on hold, then comes back and says, if the vehicle is on your private property and not blocking a public right-of-way, the HOA does not have towing authority without a court order. If someone shows up to tow it, call us and we will send an officer. I thank her, hang up, and immediately forward Angela's email to the evidence folder with a note that includes the dispatcher's statement. Then I reply to Angela, I have confirmed with local police that the HOA does not have authority to tow vehicles from private property without a court order. Any attempt to do so will be reported as theft. I expect this threat to be withdrawn immediately. I send it and get ready for work, but I am shaking. Angela is escalating faster than I expected, and I know the meeting is still a week away. I cannot wait that long if she is serious about the tow. At lunch, I call a towing company I know from work, one of the outfits we refer customers to when they need accident recovery. I ask the dispatcher if they have any contracts with HOAs in the area, and she checks the system and says they do work for a couple associations, but she cannot give me details. I ask if they have ever towed a car from a private driveway on HOA orders, and she laughs. She says, we would not touch that. Too much liability. If someone calls and says the HOA authorized it, we ask for documentation, and 9 times out of 10 they do not have it. I thank her and hang up, feeling a little better. If Angela actually tries to call a tow, most companies are going to ask questions she cannot answer. But I also know she is stubborn enough to find someone who will do it anyway, so I am not out of danger yet. That afternoon, I get a text from Tom. He says, I heard Angela is trying to tow your car. That is not board approved. She is doing it on her own. If you can prove she is acting without authority, you can get her removed. I ask how I prove that, and he says recording. If she admits it on tape, the board cannot ignore it. I think about that for a minute, then I text back, how do I get her to admit it? He replies, bait her. She loves to gloat. If you push back, she will double down and say something stupid. Be ready. I thank him and put my phone away, and I spend the rest of the afternoon thinking about how to make that work. Wednesday morning, I am getting ready for work when I hear a car door slam in the driveway. I look out the window and see Angela walking toward my front door, holding a clipboard and wearing her blue parka and earmuffs. I grab my phone, open the voice recorder app, and hit record. Then I shove the phone in my coat pocket with the microphone facing out and open the door before she can knock. She looks surprised for half a second, then she recovers and says, we need to talk about your vehicle. I step outside and close the door behind me, keeping my hand near my pocket to make sure the phone does not shift. I say, what about it? She taps her clipboard and says, it has been parked in violation of the emergency rules for 3 consecutive nights. The board has authorized removal, and the tow company will be here this afternoon unless you pay your outstanding balance in full. I take a breath and say, the board did not authorize that. You did. She narrows her eyes and says, I am the finance committee lead. I have the authority to enforce penalties. I shake my head and say, show me the board vote. She does not answer, just taps her smartwatch and says, you can be mad or you can be compliant. Choose one. I feel my pulse spike, but I keep my voice calm and say, I am not paying a fine for a sled that was never a violation. She smiles, the same cold smile from the first morning, and says, then you will lose your car. I walked away on purpose because I wanted her to follow and say more. She takes the bait. She follows me down the driveway, still talking, saying, you think you can fight this, but you cannot. The association has legal backing, and you are just one homeowner. Keep arguing, you are making my case for me. I turn around and say, what legal backing? What lawyer signed off on this? She hesitates, just for a second, and then she says, Clearwater handles all our enforcement actions. They have attorneys on retainer, and they will file a lien if you do not pay. I nod slowly and say, "So you are adding legal fees without board approval?" She does not answer, just turns and walks back toward her car. I stand there and watch her go. Then I pull out my phone and stop the recording. I have it. Angela admitting she is acting alone, threatening a tow without authority, and confirming the legal fees are coming from the management company, not the board. I save the file, back it up to 3 different places, and add it to the evidence folder. Then I call Tom. Tom answers, and I tell him I have the recording. He listens to the whole thing, and when it is done, he is quiet for a minute. Then he says, "That is enough to force a recall vote. If you play that at the meeting, the rest of the board will have to act or they will be liable too." I ask if he will back me up, and he says I will, but you need to bring copies for everyone and you need to stay calm. Angela will try to shut you down, and if you lose your temper, she will use it against you. I promise I will keep it together, and I thank him. Then I spend the rest of the day making sure I have everything I need: printed timelines, highlighted bylaws, the code enforcement letter, the recording on a thumb drive, and copies of every email and letter Angela has sent. By the time I am done, I have a 3-inch binder and a plan to walk through it step by step at the meeting. That night I barely sleep, running through the presentation in my head and trying to anticipate every argument Angela is going to throw at me. Thursday and Friday pass in a blur of work and prep. I do not get any new emails from Angela, and my car stays in the driveway untouched. I think she is waiting to see if I am serious about showing up to the meeting, and I am. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmares and satisfying endings. The meeting is scheduled for 7 p.m. on Tuesday, and I get to the clubhouse at 6:45 to make sure I have a seat up front. The room is set up with rows of folding chairs facing a long table where the board sits, and there are maybe 20 people scattered around when I walk in. I recognize a few faces from the neighborhood, including Mike, who gives me a nod and sits 2 rows behind me. Angela is already at the table, sitting in the center chair with her clipboard and a stack of folders. She sees me, and her expression does not change, but I can tell she was hoping I would not show. The rest of the board filters in over the next 10 minutes, 5 people total including Tom, who sits at the far end and does not make eye contact with Angela. At 7, the HOA president, a retired guy named Richard, calls the meeting to order and starts with the usual announcements about landscaping schedules and clubhouse reservations. I sit through 15 minutes of routine business, waiting for the open comment period. Finally, Richard says, "We will now open the floor for member comments. Please state your name and address for the record." I stand up, walk to the front, and set my binder on the edge of the table. I say my name and address, and then I say, "I am here to address multiple violations of procedure and bylaw requirements by the Enforcement Committee, specifically actions taken by Angela Walker without board authorization." The room goes quiet. Angela leans forward and says, "This is not the appropriate forum for individual disputes. If you have a complaint, you need to submit it in writing." I look at Richard and say, "I have submitted multiple written requests for mediation under Article 9, and I have been denied or delayed at every step. I am exercising my right as a member to address the board directly." Richard looks uncomfortable, but he nods and says, "Go ahead." I open the binder and pull out the first set of documents, the Sled citation and the inflated penalties. I slide a tab timeline to the board and the room at the same time, showing every letter, every email, every escalation step. I explain the discrepancy between the posted fine schedule and the amounts Angela is charging, and I show the code enforcement letter confirming that the Sled was never a violation. Angela interrupts and says, "The member is misrepresenting the facts. The citation was valid under community standards, and the penalties reflect administrative costs." I turn to her and say, "What administrative costs? Show me the invoice." She does not answer. I move to the next section, the records denial and the $95 fee. I explain how the management company is blocking access to documents and charging excessive fees, and I show the email chain where Angela refused to provide mediation. Then I get to the tow threat. I pull out my phone, connect it to the portable speaker I brought, and say, I have a recording of Angela threatening to tow my car from my own property without board approval. Would you like to hear it? Richard looks at Angela, and Angela says, you cannot record private conversations without consent. I look at her and say, Idaho is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I am part of. I play the clip out loud in the meeting so Karen cannot talk over it. The room hears Angela say, the board has authorized removal, and then keep arguing, you are making my case for me, and finally Clearwater handles all our enforcement actions. They have attorneys on retainer and they will file a lien if you do not pay. When the clip ends, the room is silent. Richard looks at Angela and says, did you authorize a tow without a board vote? Angela straightens in her chair and says, I have discretion under my committee role to enforce penalties. Richard shakes his head and says, not for vehicle removal? You do not. That requires a vote. Tom speaks up from the end of the table. He says, I move that we suspend all enforcement actions related to this case pending a full review of the finance and compliance procedures. Another board member seconds it. Richard calls for a vote, and it passes 4-1, with Angela voting against. Angela stands up and says, this is a witch hunt. You are undermining the entire enforcement process because one member does not want to follow the rules. Tom looks at her and says, the rules you are enforcing do not exist, Angela. We have been letting you run finance and compliance like your own department, and it is clear now that you have been overstepping. Richard nods and says, we are going to bring in a neutral third party to audit the records and mediate this dispute. Angela, you are not to take any further action on this case until the review is complete. Angela grabs her clipboard and folders, stands up, and walks out of the room without another word. The rest of the meeting is a blur. Several other residents stand up and share their own stories about inflated fines, records denials, and retaliation threats. Mike talks about the door hangers and the sidewalk clearing scam. Another neighbor shows photos of a citation for a mailbox decoration that was never in the rules. By the time the comment period ends, it is clear Angela has been running a one-woman enforcement racket, and the board is scrambling to contain the damage. Richard schedules a special meeting for 2 weeks out to discuss the audit findings and vote on new procedures. I collect my documents, thank Tom quietly, and leave. Over the next 2 weeks, I hear through Mike that Angela is trying to spin the meeting as a personal attack and rallying support from a couple other board members who are loyal to her. But the damage is done. The audit starts, and the neutral third party is a former city attorney who specializes in HOA disputes. He requests records from Clearwater, and when the management company tries to stall, he threatens to subpoena them. Within a week, he has a report showing that Angela has been approving invoices for legal fees that were never incurred, padding the enforcement budget with charges that went straight to Clearwater's profit margin, and authorizing penalties without board votes. The report also shows that the records denial fees were a revenue stream Angela and Clearwater set up together, splitting the proceeds. The board calls an emergency meeting and the attorney presents the findings. Angela is not there. The board votes unanimously to remove her from the finance committee and refer the matter to the county prosecutor for investigation. 2 other board members who were close to Angela resign the same night. The board president steps down a week later, citing health reasons, but everyone knows it is because he let Angela operate unchecked for too long. Tom is appointed interim president, and he calls a special election to fill the vacant seats. A neighbor petition that forces a vote during the meeting results in a full slate of reform candidates running on a platform of transparency and accountability. They win in a landslide. By the time the next storm hits, the new board has repealed half the enforcement policies Angela put in place, fired Clearwater, and hired a reputable management company that actually follows the bylaws. My gate access is restored, my fines are refunded in full, and I get a formal apology letter from the new board president. The HOA agrees to mediation with a neutral third party for any future disputes, and the new board votes to publish all enforcement actions and financials online so members can see what is happening in real time. Angela disappears from the neighborhood. I hear she moved out quietly a few months later, probably to avoid the prosecutor's questions. Karen is told to step down and she cannot spin it. The other board members who enabled her are gone too, replaced by people who actually care about running the association fairly. I get my savings back on track, and by spring I have enough for a down payment on a place outside the HOA sprawl. Just like I planned. Mike texts me one afternoon and says, "You should run for the board, you would be good at it." I laugh and tell him I have had enough HOA drama for a lifetime, but I appreciate the vote of confidence. The neighborhood feels different now, quieter, less tense. People are not afraid of door hangers and surprise fines anymore, and the new board is actually enforcing rules that make sense instead of making them up as they go. I still see the rideshare driver at the gate sometimes, and he always gives me a wave. I wave back, and I think about how close I came to just paying the fine and letting Angela win. I am glad I did not. I am glad I documented everything, played it smart, and forced the board to see what was really happening. It cost me time and stress, but it was worth it. The final piece comes a few months later when I get a letter from the county prosecutor's office. It is a notice that Angela Walker and 2 executives from Clearwater Property Compliance Services have been charged with fraud and embezzlement related to inflated fees and unauthorized charges across multiple HOA accounts in the region. The letter says my case was one of several that triggered the investigation, and they may contact me for testimony if it goes to trial. I filed the letter in my evidence folder, which I have kept even though the dispute is over, just in case. I never hear from the prosecutor again, but I see a news article 6 months later about a settlement where Clearwater paid restitution to dozens of HOAs and agreed to shut down their records management division. Angela's name is not in the article, but I know she is part of it. I print the article, add it to the folder, and close the binder for good. I kept arguing, and it turned out I was not making her case. I was making mine. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.